You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk 1150 AM. Now, back to the show with local mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell.
You are listening to The Money Hour on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, October 15th show. You can also listen to my show podcast, Facebook premiere. You can catch my show on my show YouTube channel. In addition, for more information on upcoming events, please go to tinamitchellevents.com. I am your host and local mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell. I bring into studio each week the best of the best experts in our local market on everything regarding your money. And now in studio, Dean Van Dyke of the Pillar Group LLC, how to build a ROCKSTAR Employee Acquisition Plan right here on 1150 AM KKNW. Welcome back to the show, Dean.
Well, it's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I love saying your name, Dean Van Dyke. I don't know why. It's just fun to come right out. All right. So a little bit about Dean. With the Pillars Group is a certified business coach and consultant, sought after speaker and trainer, and contributing author to the Six Figure Coach magazine. For more than 25 years, Dean has been inspiring, motivating, and equipping others to live out their dreams. A person of strong faith, Dean has devoted himself to developing and strengthening the personal and professional growth of others through business coaching, training, speaking engagements, and most importantly, serving others. Dean is a husband, a father, a veteran, thank you for your service, and a hobbyist. Since 1989, Dean has been happily married to Maria. They are proud parents of three amazing boys, Michael, Jonathan, and Zachary. And Dean loves the outdoors and is an avid shooting sport enthusiast. So as I get into our conversation here, Dean, I'd like to start out with, what is the key thing when recruiting for companies?
Well, as you may be aware, the biggest challenge right now is finding qualified folks for the team, and the one key thing for them is having a ROCKSTAR ad. I mean, if their ad is cookie cutter, just like most that I see and view, it's not going to attract the top talent that you're looking for, and that's the biggest challenge. In fact, speaking to a group of auto professionals last weekend, that's where they were struggling, and that's where, when we looked at some job ads, did some critiques, they were like, oh, it was kind of like that light bulb went off, and they're like, oh, we can do so much better. And
yeah, if you're not getting the results that you want, it is almost always in how you're delivering your message. And the adjustment to that delivery is usually just adjusting a few of those words and how you're delivering that. So true, Dean. So what is the key thing when recruiting, or no, we just answered that. I'm getting mixed in my questions here. What are the top 10 hiring mistakes, Dean, if you could list those quickly?
You bet. So the biggest challenge most people make is thinking that experience always counts. And while experience is great, what you're bringing in is a lot of bad habits potentially. And so another area is too much emphasis on the interview or hiring in your own image. Folks should look at, what are my weaknesses that I need to augment, and bring in somebody that has a strength in that area. Overly impressed by formal education. Well, that's great to see on a resume. Can you apply what you've learned? And sometimes that's not possible with what they've learned. And so training is another big one. We rely on training to fill gaps. And if the skill set doesn't match what you're trying to do, that is a huge challenge. And, another key one is poaching from your competitors. That will come back around in some form or fashion by a competitor poaching one of your team members. And the last thing is, or not last thing, but the one thing I always love to talk about is, we have two of these for a reason, and one of these need to listen more and listen for cues so that you can understand who you're potentially going to hire. Overlooking cultural fit, that's huge, because if it's not a fit for the team, it creates bigger challenges down the road. And lacking a structured hiring process, I don't know how many business owners I talk to that just don't have a process. And one of the key things I tell them is, so if you like to stay out of hot water with the government, have a structured hiring process. Last but not least is that solid onboarding plan, because if you don't bring them on and make them feel like a rock star on that through your onboarding process, it sets the tone for the future. So those are the top 10.
Just like in a marriage, you don't want it to be the best at the beginning. You want to get better as you go through it. It doesn't always happen
I'm not going to touch that one.
Okay, we'll leave that alone.
I'm not going to touch that one.
Hello, Maria, to Dean's wife, if you're listening to the show. All right, Dean, what is it that's so tough to hire? Where do you see that people, businesses have the biggest challenges to hire?
So the biggest challenge people that they're having today is, there's 10 million when I last checked the data, it was like over 10 million job openings. But really it's qualified workers. Last week when I was talking to these auto industry folks, they've had folks that apply for a job. It could be a level 1, 2, or 3 technician, and they're coming from places that, from retail and have no experience. And so the biggest challenge for them is okay, do they have the desire to learn? Because when I started out in the auto industry, I won't say how many decades, but it was a few. I didn't know, but I grew up with a father who had spent 30 plus years as journeyman mechanic. So I had the knowledge, but a lot of people today, they want to get into a new field. And in the auto industry, depending on what you're doing, you've got to understand what you're doing, because it can be deadly if you do it wrong. And that's the biggest challenge they're having, is just qualified workers. And, another big one is still turnover, lack of childcare. That's huge. And then, there are folks that are still concerned about health. I mean, we still have, issues with COVID, we have variants, and so there are some concerns with that as well. So,
yeah. And so important when you're going through that interview process and really getting to know the candidate and, having your company stand out is just ask them 2 questions. I mean, what's really important to you? And what is it lacking, right now? And then you can really tailor around what their needs are in your conversation.
Correct.
So, Dean, what is the cost of a bad hire?
There's some statistics out there that say it could be up to 30% of the annual salary. Now, put that in perspective. I'll give you an example. So in the auto industry here in Washington State, it's about, on the auto body technician side, it's about 88,000, which is average. So 30%, that's a pretty big number for an employer to eat, because that's what happens. And luckily I can help them calculate that. I've got a workbook that actually you plug the numbers in and it will give you the number. Now, a lot of business owners don't want that number because they don't want to see what that potential damage is. But there's more just in thinking about that, as well as the motivation, the impact to your team. I mean, those are some big ones that are tough to overcome. And lastly, when talking about a bad hire, is your business's reputation.
Yeah. And it's, when it's a bad hire, then you also have the retention issue. And if you've got somebody in your team that's a bad hire, it's spreading throughout the rest of your team, where your great hires initially could become not such great parts of the team, because you've got that bad mindset that's going through the culture of the organization. So, Dean, what is an essential thing for a company to do when hiring that they should remember?
So one of the key things I always do is in working with my clients as they work to bring candidates through, is we put them through a test drive. We put them through a situation that they would be doing in their normal course of work. For example, one of my clients is in the auto industry. And if they're hiring a new technician, we're going to bring that technician in for maybe 4 to 8 hours, paid, of course, and give them a project to do, whether it's metal fabrication, taking apart a vehicle or something like that, so that we can understand and evaluate whether or not they can do the job. And if they can't do the job, then it's not a good fit for them. And also it helps you to understand team dynamics. Because I always recommend taking them to lunch. Let the team take them to lunch and let the team interact and understand who this person is that they're seeking to hire.
Definitely. Yeah. I call that working interviews. And, in the mortgage business, and a lot of industries, and different, but the same as what you just shared, is is case studies,
Right.
put together a case study. You need somebody to present, have them put together a presentation. If you need somebody that needs to be out networking for your business, you need to go to a networking event and see how they engage. So really important to have those working interviews. And just as Dean said, to have them in doing that job to see how they're going to do, and really great share of having them interact with the team, because ultimately that's who they're going to be spending their time with. And the team will appreciate having an input of who's going to be brought into that team. Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Dean, how should a company craft its recruiting ad? What are key points?
So one of the things in my practice is I use a formula called AIDA, which is attention, interest, desire, and action. And using that structure helps to, one, let them know that you're looking for rock stars, and you can use different verbiage, but a lot of ads you see out there is hey, come work for us. We're a great company. Well, I would hope so. But it's things like using that formula, and there's other marketing formulas out there that you can use, but that's the one I use with my clients. And last week we actually went through an exercise to where I showed them. I didn't pick on their job ads. I went and found another one, but and we went through there and I said, hey, this is how I would revise this ad. And you could see all the light bulbs go off in their heads about, oh, wow, that is different. Yes. And then I had them, rewrite their job ads and then present them. And it was an amazing difference.
Yeah, that's great. And by having a great ad, you're standing out most likely from all of the people that you're trying to compete for that same candidate, and your ad's is going to stand out for them. So where could a company generate recruiting leads?
So the first place I tell them to look in-house. There could be, one of your team members has a referral, knows somebody, but they don't think about it, right? Unless you ask.
Yeah.
And in the other place I always look is call back previous employees that were rock stars on your team, because you never know what their situation is. If you haven't stayed in contact, then it's somewhat of a, that's the quickest way. But as you know, with networking, referrals are the best way to find that next resource. And when the business owners are out networking, and I've got a list of 20 different ones. I promise I won't go through them all here, but when the business owners are out networking, every networking opportunity could potentially be a job interview that they could do. And so it's just being aware and understanding what those different avenues are. And if you notice, I didn't mention job boards because that's where everybody runs.
Yeah.
So
just like if you're in sales in your business, it's the same. If you're going out and recruiting for candidates, it's a much more successful process if you court the warm and don't have to stalk the cold. So Dean, what are some techniques to screen initial candidates?
So one of the things that I love to coach clients as well as folks that are in the, out there recruiting is you really need to, there's some quick screening processes that you can use. First of all, stop having them email your business address. Set up a separate and distinct recruiting email, whether it's recruiting@abc.com, but at least they're not going to your inbox. And second, I always set up a separate phone number, because if they're going to call, and in your ad, you call this out, hey, call this number between the hours of 2 and 4 p.m. on these 2 days, and leave a 60-second voicemail about why we should hire you. The folks that call outside those hours, we're not going to talk to them because it's a lack of attention to detail. Yes. And in any job that you do, attention to detail is important. And so those two key things will help you screen out the ones that are not the rock stars.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, we've got less than a minute, a shout out or a call to action, anything to share with our listeners, team, before I wrap up the show.
You bet. So if you're struggling to hire, if you can't find who you're looking for, please don't hesitate to reach out. I offer a 30-minute complimentary coaching session, and I'll also provide my 4-step recruiting process that you can take and implement and go find that rockstar employee.
Yes. Well said. Thank you so much, Dean. Again,
Thank you
for coming into the show. I look forward to having you back.